What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Rad Chad Show. Today we have got a review for you of Spirit Island Branch and Claw. Now, I enjoyed the base game, at least enough to buy the expansion, but does it actually improve the game? Let's find out right now in this review. Okay, so the first thing that I want to mention about Spirit Island, just in general, is that I gave the base game a 7 out of 10. It's a very respectable, in my opinion, good review, but I think the game has actually increased in how much I enjoy it as time has gone on, as I've become more comfortable with the rules. One of my main criticisms about that game was just that it was death by 1,000 cuts. There was just a ton of small little nagging rules that you had to remember, and keeping track of everything on the board could be a bit overwhelming and cause some analysis paralysis. But as I played the game more and more and more, and now we're talking about dozens of plays, even including the ones with the expansion, I've really grown a big appreciation for the game. And who knows, this might be a game that might be the first one that I do a re-review for, because I might actually increase my score for the game. But we'll hold off on that for now, because right now we just want to talk about Branch and Claw. Now we're going to divide this sort of into two sections, right? The first will be what components and what things come with the game. We'll talk about just what you're going to actually experience. And then the second thing we'll talk about is my impressions of the expansion. So the first thing, obviously, we just mentioned is what comes in the box. You get an absolute ton of content. If you're looking for more replayability with a specific game, obviously being Spirit Island, this is going to give it to you in spades. I don't think I've played an expansion that added as much content as this does for this game in any other game I've ever played or any other expansion I've ever played. So first of all, you're going to get a nice new board. You can place things like the enemy, the invader that is. You can place things like the scenario card. You get this new event deck. So basically each round you're going to flip up a new event card. That event will not only give the enemies, so the invaders, advantages, but it might also help you in some way, shape, or form. So I like that balance between increasing the difficulty but then also making you stronger. I like that a lot. It gives you all of these new tokens. So you've got things like disease tokens, beast tokens. I forget the name of the other two tokens, but they do all sorts of nasty tricks. We'll dive more in depth into those. Then you get just a wicked ton of more minor and major power cards. It almost doubles the deck of cards that the base game originally came with. And then last but not least, you get two brand new characters, one of which sort of looks like a Groot-looking tree dude. He's really cool. Then you get like this black and red tiger that's kind of off lurking in the shadows of the jungle. He's also very, very neat and interesting. And there may even be things that just off the top of my head I'm not coming up with, because this game just has a ton of content crammed into one box. So if you're looking for more content for Spirit Island, I gotta tell you right now that this really delivers, and I don't think you'll ever need another expansion. Now, who knows? The game's been really successful. I think that more are going to become coming down the pipeline. So we'll see. I'd be very excited to play those, because giving away my review here a little bit, I enjoy this expansion quite a bit. So let's talk a little bit about some of those things that I said come in the box and why I enjoy them. So the first thing is the new board. I really love any sort of components that help you organize things and make the game easier to process, especially when you have a game of this magnitude and this size. I like that clean look of having a board with areas to put everything. Absolutely love that. It's a great little addition that they didn't necessarily need to do. The second thing is the event cards. So the event cards, I think, are going to be a bit of a love it or hate it affair when it comes to people and Spirit Island Branch and Claw, because the base game had a very deterministic approach to it. You knew exactly what was going to happen each round. They're going to build here, they're going to explore there, they're going to ravage there, and you knew exactly what was going to happen, so you could plan and you could predict for that. Now, with me personally, the fact that the game really lacked any sort of random element other than what minor and major power cards you were going to draw, it lacked at least on the enemy side of things, that random element that I get in games like Pandemic, which adds a little bit of spice and a flair. In Pandemic, you're flipping up cards and you never know, okay, is the one card that's going to cause an outbreak going to flip up or not? I think that the events in this game add that little extra flair of randomness and excitement to the game, and it's not so overwhelming that you feel like you won or lost based off of what event cards you drew. It just adds another dynamic to the game that I actually thoroughly enjoy. So I very much like the event cards. When it comes to the tokens, now you've got 4 different tokens. So for example, some act more or less like an automatic defense, like you put these little tokens out on a city or a town, for example, and the next time they go to ravage, that city or that town doesn't actually do a ravage action, and then you would remove that token. You've got some tokens that prevent people from exploring in certain regions, which is a great way to preemptively attack back more or less against the enemies. Then you've got some tokens out there that are beast tokens. Now these beast tokens only activate when specific cards or specific effects, like with your character board, tell you to activate them. A lot of times they sort of act like spokes, right? Your fingers and your toes. So the creatures of the island kind of working on behalf of your spirit to kick these invaders off the island. And I think that's a neat thematic touch. And I know that I'm missing one of the tokens here. It's eluding me for whatever reason. But you do have 4 tokens that you can now dabble and play with. And the only thing that I'll say is that the tokens really do add a fairly hefty additional weight to the game. It adds a bit too much complexity in what was already a complex game. A game where the base game alone I already felt was a click above what it actually needed to be, and you could have scaled back some of the rules and potentially made a better game, in my opinion. Again, I think what my words were, it seemed like they packed all of these great ideas into one box, and while they're all great ideas, I felt like a few of them could have been left on the chopping block, on the editorial block, and you could have actually made a better game. Well, now we've got even more great ideas being thrown in there, and it just becomes a bit too over convoluted, especially as it pertains to the tokens, because really at the end, or more so the middle of the game, there can be tokens on almost every single land. It gets pretty overwhelming, and I don't know if I was a huge fan of that, but if you found that the base game you're completely comfortable with, you're ready for something that brings more to the table, and you're not intimidated by the added rules that the game is going to give you, then hey, dive head first, because that's really my only main criticism about the game. The only other main criticism I would say is that, like, for example, with the minor and the major power cards, since they reference the tokens so much, and even the event cards reference those tokens a lot, it sort of is like an all-in-one package. It's like you either play with the expansion or you don't play with the expansion at all. Somebody had mentioned on my previous podcast where I talked about Branch and Claw a little bit, my first impressions, that there are ways to kind of work around that and make it to where you only use the content that doesn't require things. So basically, there are ways to make it to where you don't have to use everything within the expansion, but I got to tell you, it was clearly designed that if you want to use the tokens, you want to use the minor major power cards, you got to use them together. You want to use the event cards, you need to use the tokens. So you got to use everything in the expansion. And I think that was a bit of a flaw, because especially if you're going to introduce this to a new game, you might really want to use something like the extra minor and major power cards, but you don't want to explain all the tokens. And so you really this is something that I think is for people who have played and loved and are very comfortable with the game. This is definitely not a beginner-friendly expansion, but that might not be a flaw for a lot of people out there. So the last thing that I want to mention is the 2 new characters. So you get this this tiger character who just throws out a whole bunch of beast tokens. He can kind of move around with his beast tokens. They put his difficulty, I think, at a low or a moderate complexity. I got to tell you, I found him actually to be the more complex of the 2 characters. Now, he's really unique in the sense that he moves around with his beast tokens. His presence out on the board is constantly moving. It's sort of like this feral cat kind of stalking the prey in the jungle, and I like that about the character. He's very thematic in that sense, but I just liked the other Groot character so much more, because For me personally, I love that feeling of ramping up and getting a whole bunch of power. And what this Groot character does extremely well is as you put more and more presence onto the board and you get to the end late game of Spirit Island, he's just amassing insane amounts of energy / money. He can play just these huge old cards from the major power deck because he's got so much energy. And when you can just lay huge masses of devastation out on the island, you feel really, really powerful. And I just felt he was really easy to use, other than the fact that you have to be very conscientious of he can't spread across the island very fast. He sort of hunkers down and can lay some serious devastation towards the end of the game. So they've got just wildly varying play styles, which is one of the best things about Spirit Island, because when you mix and match these with all of the various spirits from the base game, you again have just got so much variety to experience here that I gotta give the designers hats off. This is the most replayable game I think I currently own, and that's really saying something. So if anything about this expansion piques your interest, I think definitely give it a shot. I think it's a great expansion, with the one caveat being, be very comfortable with the game, be very understanding that this is going to add complexity to the game, and that you need to fully understand both the rules of the base game and this expansion to fully enjoy the game. But for us personally, like I mentioned at the very beginning, our enjoyment of Spirit Island keeps going up and up and up as we do become more and more comfortable with the game. So I think it was the right time for us to play the expansion, and I really enjoyed it. I would probably give it, just like the base game, the same score. I'd give it a 7 out of 10 for now. I think it's a very good expansion. It's not the perfect or best expansion I've ever played, but I think it's absolutely worth people's while if you're a fan of the game. And I think there are going to be a lot of people who say, no, this is an 8 or a 9 or even a 10 out of 10. I really think for a lot of people, they're going to love this expansion. So anyways, that was my take on Spirit Island Branch and Claw, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Thank you for watching the Rad Chad Show. Until next time.